Sometimes the cruelest people are the ones who smile while they destroy you. Margaret Whitmore knew this truth better than most. The church basement was cold that Saturday morning. Margaret's hands moved over dried herbs, grinding them into powder for the charity fund. It was the only work she could find now, 3 weeks after her husband Samuel died and left her with nothing but his debts. The door opened. Constance Gideon descended the stairs, 2 church ladies trailing behind her like vultures. "Margaret," Constance said, her voice sharp, "the marriage auction is tomorrow. All unmarried women must attend. That includes widows." Margaret's hands froze. "But Samuel just died. And you've been unmarried for 3 weeks. The town has a crisis. Too many women, not enough support. You'll stand with the others." Mrs. Porter circled the table. "If you'd been a proper wife, maybe Samuel wouldn't have drunk himself to death." The words hit like a slap. Margaret's hands trembled. She reached for a glass bottle, and it slipped. Glass shattered across the stone floor. "Clumsy." Mrs. Walsh laughed. "And you used to deliver babies with those hands?" Margaret dropped to her knees, gathering broken glass as tears blurred her vision. "Be at the square tomorrow. 8 o'clock. Constance's footsteps faded up the stairs. Margaret whispered to the empty room, "Mrs. Henderson, I wish you were still here." But her mentor, the midwife who'd trained her for 7 years, had been dead for 6 months. And Margaret had never felt more alone. An hour later, Margaret stood in Dr. Eleanor Finch's office. "Dr. Finch, Mrs. Patterson is due soon. I could assist." "No." The doctor didn't look up from her papers. "I delivered 23 babies under Mrs. Henderson. Mrs. Henderson is dead." Dr. Finch finally met her eyes. "And frankly, Margaret, your presence would distress expectant mothers. They need to feel safe. Your appearance doesn't inspire confidence." Margaret's gaze found her old medical satchel on the shelf, the one Mrs. Henderson had given her. "That's mine. It belongs to this practice now. Good day." Margaret left, throat tight with unshed tears. At the general store, she placed medical supplies on the counter. Bandages. A needle. $1.75, the shopkeeper said. She had $1.20. "Could I pay the rest next week?" He laughed. "Your dead husband owes me $23. I'm not giving you credit. A wife's debt is her husband's debt, even when he's rotting in the ground." He took her coins and removed half the supplies. "Heard about tomorrow's auction. Save yourself the trouble. No man bids on women your size." The men by the stove roared with laughter. Margaret grabbed what was left and ran. By evening, the church bell was clanging. 3 heavy strikes that pulled everyone to the town square. The town crier climbed a wooden platform. "By order of Mayor Calloway, this town faces a crisis of morality. Unwed mothers, widows draining charity, spinsters wasting away." The crowd pressed closer. "Tomorrow at noon, marriage auction. All unmarried women under 40 must attend. Men who claim wives will receive land grants and tax relief. For decency. For prosperity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Constance appeared beside Margaret. "All unmarried women. No exceptions. No man will choose me." "Exactly." Constance smiled coldly. "And when you're the last woman standing alone and rejected, this entire town will see exactly what you are." That night, Margaret sat in her tiny room staring at her only good dress. Faded blue. Too tight across her middle. She pulled it on. The fabric strained. The seams pulled. She looked down at her belly, prominent, soft, impossible to hide. "They'll think I'm pregnant," she whispered. "They'll laugh." She lay down fully clothed, too exhausted to move. Outside, redemption settled into sleep. Inside, Margaret whispered into the darkness, "Please, just let it end quickly." But she already knew the truth. Tomorrow wouldn't be quick. Tomorrow would be the longest day of her life. And there was no escape. The auction was mandatory. The humiliation was guaranteed. All she could do was stand there and endure it, just like she'd endured everything else. Alone. Sunday arrived with merciless sunshine. Margaret walked to the town square at 11:30, her blue dress clinging to her body, her hands shaking. The heat felt cruel, pressing on her from every side, as if even the sun wished to expose her. Dust swirled around her boots with every hesitant step. The square was already packed. The entire town had turned out, men, women, children, drawn by spectacle. A wooden platform stood at the center. Women were lining up beside it, their faces tight with dread and resignation. Margaret counted them. 15. Maybe 20. Young girls with swollen bellies and shame-red faces. Older spinsters with hollow eyes. A few other widows with clothes as worn as her own. Every one of them looked scared. Every one of them looked like they'd been dragged here from the edges of hope. She joined the end of the line. The whispers started immediately. Is that Margaret Whitmore? Look at the size of her. Is she pregnant or just fat? Margaret kept her eyes down, face burning. The words slid across her skin like blades. The square smelled of sweat, horse manure, and judgment. A little girl tugged on her mother's dress and pointed at Margaret. Mama, why is she standing so far back? Because no man is going to want her, sweetheart. Margaret's throat closed. She forced herself to stay in line, to keep breathing, to keep standing even as humiliation wrapped around her like a second dress. Mayor Calloway climbed the platform, his vest straining over his belly. Sheriff Dawson stood beside him with a ledger. Citizens of redemption, the mayor boomed. These women are burdens this town can no longer carry. Gentlemen, you will choose. A cheer rose from a cluster of men near the saloon. Several women flinched. Margaret felt her knees weaken. Sheriff Dawson opened his ledger. First woman, Emma Lawson, age 19, with child. A blonde girl stepped forward, trembling so badly she nearly tripped. Do I hear a claim? A young rancher stepped forward. I'll take her. The transaction was recorded. The girl was led away, quiet, small, grateful, and terrified all at once. One by one, women were claimed. The pretty ones went first, then the young ones, then the ones with skills. A seamstress, a cook, a woman whose father owned a small orchard. They disappeared into waiting hands. The line shrank. Margaret remained. The sun climbed higher. Sweat trickled down her back. Her dress stuck to her skin. A fly landed on her cheek. She didn't bother to shoo it away. Finally, she was alone. The crowd went quiet, sensing the climax. Even children stopped fidgeting. The entire town seemed to lean in, hungry for her humiliation. Final woman, Sheriff Dawson said. Margaret Whitmore. Age 32. Widow. Margaret climbed the steps. Each one felt like a mile. When she reached the top and turned, the sun blazed directly in her eyes. She raised a hand to block it, but it didn't matter. Everyone could see her clearly. Mayor Calloway looked at her with barely concealed disgust. Margaret Whitmore. Widow of Samuel Whitmore. No property. No skills of value. Only her late husband's debts. Soft, scattered laughter from the crowd. Then louder. Then cruel. Does any man here claim Margaret Whitmore? Silence. Heavy. Final. Crushing. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then a voice from the crowd. Is she pregnant or just fat? Explosive laughter. Another voice. If there is a baby, it'll need its own wagon. More laughter. A woman's voice snapped. She's not with child. Just with gluttony. Margaret's hands moved to her stomach, protective, ashamed. She wished she could disappear, vanish like smoke into the air. Her knees started to buckle. She gripped the railing. Sheriff Dawson raised his gavel. Going once. Margaret closed her eyes. Going twice. This was it. The poorhouse. 7 years of servitude. Proof she was worthless. Proof this town had always been waiting, waiting for the chance to crush her fully. Unsold. Wait. The word cut through the square like a knife. Every head turned. The crowd parted. A man walked forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, weathered face. Work clothes. A rancher's hat shadowing his eyes. Whispers rippled. That's Caleb Thornton. The rancher from Dead Oak Creek. Never comes to town. He doesn't talk to nobody. Sheriff Dawson lowered his gavel. Caleb, you're not registered. I'll take her. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. It was the kind of voice that didn't need to shout. The kind of voice that made people listen. The crowd erupted. What? Is he blind? Mayor Calloway sputtered. Caleb, there were 24 women today. Younger. Prettier. I said I'll take her. Caleb's voice didn't rise, but it cut him off mid-sentence. He walked toward the platform. Each step echoed. Margaret could hear the sound of his boots over the pounding of her heart. Margaret couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. This had to be a joke. The trick. Another form of cruelty. Caleb climbed the steps. Stood in front of her. Look at me, he said quietly. She lifted her eyes. His were gray, storm cloud gray, and steady. Not mocking. Not pitying. Just steady. You deserve better than this, he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. Better than them. Better than this whole damn town. The crowd roared with shock. A few gasped. Someone hissed. He extended his hand. Come with me. Margaret's hand trembled as she placed it in his. His grip was warm. The first real touch she'd felt in months. Sheriff Dawson marked his ledger, voice tight. Margaret Whitmore. Claimed by Caleb Thornton. The crowd exploded. He's insane. He'll regret it by morning. Poor bastard doesn't know what he's gotten. Caleb turned to face them. His voice rang across the square, hard as iron. Any man here got something to say to my face? Silence dropped like a stone. Not one man stepped forward. Caleb helped Margaret down the steps. They walked through the crowd together. Heads turned. People parted for them like water. No one laughed now. No one dared. At the edge of the square, Caleb's horse waited. A big bay gelding, calm and steady. He helped her into the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, steady, protective, anchoring her in a world that had felt like nothing but storms. They rode away from redemption as the sun reached its peak. Behind them, the silence held. The town watched them go as if unable to understand what had just happened. And for the first time in 3 weeks, Margaret could finally breathe. She wasn't safe. She wasn't healed. But she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Caleb's ranch sat in a valley between 2 hills, about an hour's ride from town. The house was small but solid, wood and stone, with a covered porch. Beyond it, a barn and corral. It was quiet, peaceful. Everything redemption wasn't. Caleb dismounted, then helped Margaret down. Her legs shook. Come inside, he said. The house was clean. Simple. A main room with a fireplace, a kitchen, a table. Caleb opened a door on the far wall. You'll sleep here. Bed's comfortable. Margaret stared. Where will you? Barn loft. I've got a bedroll. His tone left no room for argument. You need space. Take it. That night, Margaret lay in Caleb's bed and waited for the cruelty to start. It didn't come. Days passed. Caleb rose before dawn. Made coffee and breakfast, eggs, bacon, bread. Set a plate on the table for her, took his own outside. Never commented on how much she ate. Never watched her with judgment. Just left the food and worked. Margaret tried to help. Washed dishes. Swept floors. Mended torn shirts. Caleb thanked her simply. Appreciate it. Nothing more. By the end of the first week, Margaret's confusion had shifted into something else. Curiosity. One evening, she watched him work in the corral. He favored his left hand. When he came in for supper, she saw the bandana wrapped around his palm. Dark with blood. What happened? Barbed wire snapped. Caught my hand. The gash was deep, still bleeding. Margaret's hands moved before her mind caught up. Sit down. Caleb looked surprised. Sit, she repeated, already moving. Do you have thread? A needle? Sewing kit's in the... Get it. He did. Margaret washed her hands, then examined the wound. Deep but clean, running from his thumb to his wrist. Her hand steadied. Remembered. She threaded the needle with fingers that didn't shake. Met his eyes once. This will hurt. I know. She stitched. Each stitch precise, even, exactly how Mrs. Henderson had taught her. Caleb watched her work. You've done this before. I was a midwife's apprentice. 7 years. Delivered 23 babies. She tied off the final stitch. Then they decided my appearance made mothers nervous. Silence. Then Caleb spoke, his voice low and firm. Your hands are steady. Gentle. That's all that matters in healing. The rest of it, what they said, what they think, that's their failing. Not yours. Margaret looked up at him, something cracking open in her chest. Not quite hope, but close. Why did you choose me? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Really? Why? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. I'd seen you before, he finally said. Few years back. My wife Emma was pregnant. Having a hard time. Mrs. Henderson came to help. You were with her. Margaret's breath caught. She remembered that birth. Emma was scared, Caleb continued. But you sat with her. Held her hand. Talked to her soft and kind. Made her feel safe. His jaw tightened. Emma died 3 months later. Fever. But those last months, she'd talk about you. About how gentle you were. Said you had healer's hands. His eyes met Margaret's. So when I saw you on that platform with the whole town mocking you, all I could think was, that's the woman who made my dying wife feel safe. And they're treating her like she's worthless. He reached out and took her hand. I didn't choose you because I pitied you. I chose you because I already knew your worth. Figured it was time you remembered it too. Margaret couldn't speak. Tears streamed down her face, not from pain, but from something else entirely. Relief. Gratitude. Recognition. Thank you, she whispered. Caleb squeezed her hand gently. Don't thank me yet. We've still got to go back to that town eventually. And when we do, they're going to see exactly what I see. A woman who saves lives. Whether they like it or not. 3 weeks passed. The routines deepened. The silence between them grew comfortable instead of awkward. Margaret felt pieces of herself returning. Small pieces. Fragile ones. But returning nonetheless. Then one Sunday, Caleb said, Need supplies. You should come with me. No reason to hide. Margaret's stomach twisted. They'll stare. Let them. His voice was steel. You're my wife now. They'll show respect or answer to me. It wasn't a question. It was a promise. And somehow, that made all the difference. They rode into redemption together on a Sunday afternoon. The stares started immediately. Whispers followed them down Main Street. But Caleb's presence, his size, his silence, his absolute indifference to their judgment, created a shield Margaret had never known. They were leaving the general store when the screaming started. Help! Someone help! People poured into the street. Sarah Mitchum staggered out of the boarding house, clutching her swollen belly. Her face was white with terror. The baby, something's wrong, it's coming but it won't. She screamed, doubling over. Her husband Tom rushed to her. Get the doctor. Dr. Finch is in Silvertown. Won't be back till tomorrow. Then who? Margaret stepped forward. The crowd parted, then went silent. I can help, Margaret said. Tom looked at her, contempt twisting his features. You're the widow from the auction. What do you know? I apprenticed under Mrs. Henderson for 7 years. Margaret's voice was steady. I've delivered 23 babies. I know complications. I can help her. Sarah screamed again. Tom looked around wildly. No one else moved. Caleb's hand touched Margaret's back. Supportive. She can. His voice carried absolute certainty. Tom's face crumpled. Fine. Fine. Just help her. Inside the boarding house, they carried Sarah to her room. Margaret assessed quickly. Her heart sank. The baby was coming feet first. Deadly for both mother and child. Everyone out except one woman to assist, Margaret ordered. The landlady stayed. Tom and Caleb were pushed into the hall. Margaret knelt beside the bed. Sarah, listen. Your baby's positioned wrong. Feet first. I need to turn her. It's going to hurt. Do you trust me? Sarah's eyes were wild. Please, don't let her die. I won't. Margaret meant it. Breathe with me. She worked. Her hands pressed against Sarah's belly, feeling for position. Gently, carefully, coaxing the baby to turn. Sarah screamed. In the hallway, Tom lunged for the door. Caleb caught him, held him back. Let her work, Caleb said, his voice rough but controlled. She knows what she's doing. Inside, Margaret blocked out everything except the life beneath her hands. She remembered every lesson, every birth, every moment of doubt she'd pushed through. Come on, she whispered. Turn for me, little one. Turn. She felt it. The shift. Sarah. Margaret's voice rang with authority. Next pain you push. Your baby's ready. Sarah pushed. And pushed. And finally, a baby's cry split the air. Margaret caught the infant, cleared her airway, wrapped her quickly. She's perfect, Margaret said, voice breaking. Sarah, she's perfect. Sarah sobbed with relief as Margaret placed the baby in her arms. Only then did Margaret let herself breathe. She stood, legs shaking, and opened the door. Tom stood frozen. Behind him, a crowd had gathered, church ladies, townsfolk, Constance. Your daughter, Margaret said quietly. Both healthy. Tom rushed past her. Through the open door, everyone could see Sarah holding her baby. Could hear the infant's healthy cries. Tom turned back. Dropped to his knees in front of Margaret. I'm sorry. His voice broke. God forgive me. I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Margaret touched his shoulder briefly. Then she walked into the hallway. The crowd parted. Constance stood at the back, her face unreadable. Caleb waited at the end of the hall. When Margaret reached him, he placed his hand at the small of her back. You did good, he said quietly. Fierce pride in his voice. Real good. They walked together through the absolute silence. Outside, the sun was setting. Ready to go home? Caleb asked. The words settled into Margaret's chest like a warm coal. Yes, she said. Let's go home. As they rode away, Caleb spoke again. They saw it today. Your skill. Your worth. Some of them won't forget it. And the ones who do? Caleb's arm tightened around her waist. They'll have to answer to me. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. And Margaret realized something. She wasn't alone anymore. Not in fear. Not in judgment. Not in anything. She had Caleb. And Caleb had her back. Not because he had to. Because he chose to. Every single day. Word spread through Redemption like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew Margaret Whitmore had saved Sarah Mitchum's baby. Turned a breech birth. Saved 2 lives. By the end of the week, women started coming to Caleb's ranch. First was a young pregnant girl, terrified and alone. Mrs. Thornton? Could you check on my baby? Margaret examined her gently. Positioned perfectly. Strong heartbeat. You're healthy. The girl left crying with relief. More came. Some apologized awkwardly for how they treated her. Margaret accepted without resentment. She attended 2 more births. Both successful. Each time, she felt more of herself returning. One afternoon, a carriage appeared. Dr. Finch climbed down, holding a wrapped bundle. Margaret. The doctor's voice was stiff. I heard about Sarah Mitchum. Breech presentation. Manual version. That's not easy. No, it's not. Dr. Finch held out the bundle. Margaret unwrapped it. Her medical satchel. The one Mrs. Henderson had given her. This belongs to you, Dr. Finch said. Then quieter, I was wrong. About you. If you're willing, I could use an assistant. 4 complicated cases. Margaret clutched the satchel, unable to speak. Dr. Finch nodded once and left. Caleb found Margaret on the porch, crying and smiling at once. He didn't ask questions. Just sat beside her in comfortable silence. 1 month after the auction, a fine carriage pulled up to the ranch. Constance Gideon climbed down. Alone. Margaret stiffened, but Caleb's hand found hers. Constance approached slowly. Margaret, my daughter Abigail. She's with child. 5 months. She's terrified. Small-framed. Dr. Finch says there might be complications. She paused. Would you attend her? Margaret looked at the woman who'd orchestrated her public humiliation. Caleb squeezed her hand but said nothing. Her choice. Margaret took a breath. Yes. I'll help her. Constance's eyes closed briefly. Thank you. She turned to leave, then stopped. I was wrong. About you. About everything I did. That day in the square, her voice cracked. It was cruel. Yes, Margaret said quietly. It was. I don't expect forgiveness. Good. Margaret's voice was firm but not harsh. Because I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for your daughter. And because every life deserves protection. Even when the people around it don't deserve mercy. Constance nodded, unable to speak, and left. Caleb pulled Margaret close. Proud of you. For what? For being bigger than they ever were. 2 months after the auction, Margaret walked through redemption without fear. Pregnant women greeted her warmly. Mothers thanked her. Even the shopkeeper nodded stiffly when she entered his store. She wore a new dress, deep blue, properly fitted. Caleb had taken her to the seamstress. Make her something that fits. Something beautiful. For the first time in years, Margaret looked in a mirror and didn't turn away. One evening, walking back from Dr. Finch's practice, Margaret passed the town square. The wooden platform still stood there, weathered now. She stopped and looked at it. That platform had been built for her humiliation, her rejection. But standing here now, whole and healed and necessary, Margaret understood something. They hadn't broken her that day. They tried. They'd certainly tried. But the woman who'd stood on that platform wasn't the woman standing here now. That woman had remembered her worth, reclaimed her purpose, chosen mercy over bitterness. That woman had found a man who saw her truly and chose her anyway. Not to save her, but to stand beside her while she saved herself. Margaret turned away from the platform and walked home. When she arrived, Caleb was on the porch. He looked up, and his face softened in that way it only did for her. How was town? He asked. Good. She climbed the steps and sat beside him. Mrs. Patterson's baby is due soon. She asked me to attend. You will. Not a question. A certainty. Caleb, Margaret said softly. Thank you. For seeing me when no one else would. He took her hand. I didn't see something no one else could see. I just saw what was always there. You're the one who remembered it. The sun was setting over the valley, painting everything gold. Inside, Margaret's medical satchel sat ready for the next call. Outside, the prairie grass whispered in the wind. And on the porch, Margaret and Caleb sat together, 2 people who'd been broken by loss and judgment, now building something that looked like healing. Something that felt like home. They'd called her unmarriageable. Worthless. Too much. But they'd been wrong. Margaret wasn't too much. She was exactly enough. She always had been. Years later, when people in redemption spoke of the marriage auction, they did not speak of humiliation. They spoke of the day a woman stood alone on a platform and refused to break. Children were born into the world with Margaret Thornton's steady hands guiding them. Families whispered gratitude. Even the old gossips softened when she passed. On quiet evenings, Margaret would sit on the porch with Caleb, watching the sun settle behind the hills. She still carried her scars, but they no longer owned her. They had become proof of everything she survived. Sometimes a stranger riding through town would ask, "Is it true?" The story they tell about the woman no man wanted. Margaret would smile, calm, sure, unshaken. "No," she'd say, "the truth is better." And behind her, inside the little home she and Caleb built, her well-worn satchel waited on its hook, always ready, always needed. A reminder that the world had once tried to diminish her. And failed.